The halls of Winterthorn Keep were silent. The torches flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the stone walls like restless spirits. Every corner of the great hall seemed heavy with despair. At the center of it all lay Alpha King Kale, slumped in his throne, motionless. The battle that had left him in this state was whispered across kingdoms. A curse born of jealousy and dark sorcery had robbed him of life itself, or so it seemed. For days, the keep's healers had tried every method they knew. They burned herbs, chanted prayers, and performed rituals that had once revived the weakest of kings. But Kale remained unresponsive. His body was warm and his chest rose slightly with shallow breaths, yet his eyes never opened. Soldiers whispered in corners, their voices laced with fear. Without Kale, the kingdom was like a ship adrift in a storm. No leader could replace him, not fully. Among the gathered healers, there was a sense of hopelessness. "He's gone," muttered one, shaking his head. Another simply wept, clutching her hands over her mouth as if speaking would make the truth worse. Even the generals, men hardened by countless battles, bowed their heads in quiet despair. Kyle had not just been a king. He had been a symbol of strength, a protector whose presence had demanded respect and inspired loyalty. Then, as if summoned by fate itself, Serenia arrived. Her boots made no sound on the cold stone floor, and her cloak, dark as the midnight sky, barely rustled. Rumors had preceded her, a healer from a distant valley, skilled in ways older than any magic known in Winterthorn. Some said she could speak to the winds, others that she could call the dead to answer, yet none who had seen her up close felt fear. There was something about her that commanded attention without shouting, that demanded respect without asserting it. Serenia paused at the foot of Kale's throne, her eyes tracing the sharp lines of his face. Even in sleep, even in the fragile stillness of his cursed state, Kale's presence was undeniable. She felt the weight of his power in the air, and yet beneath it a deep, hollow pain lingered. This was not merely a body under a curse, it was a soul fractured, a mind trapped in darkness. She knelt slowly, setting her hands lightly upon the edge of the throne. Her touch did not disturb, did not demand, but offered a quiet promise. The other healers watched, some with awe, some with suspicion. "What can she do that we could not?" one whispered, almost to himself. Serenia's voice was soft, a whisper that barely disturbed the torch's flames. "Kyle," she said, the word rolling like a chant, simple and yet imbued with something deeper. A subtle vibration filled the hall, like the first echo of thunder before a storm. She spoke again, a single word, strange and melodic. It was not meant to awaken the body, not yet, but to touch the soul, to reach the part of Kale that had been hidden even from himself. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The shadows on the walls flickered as though uncertain, as though even the light paused to watch. Then a shiver ran through Kale's chest. The healers gasped. A tiny, almost imperceptible twitch of his fingers startled them. The generals leaned forward, eyes wide. This had not happened before. Serenia did not pull back. She placed a hand over Kale's heart and murmured the word again. "Kale." This time the sound carried more weight, more power, more intention. The very air in the hall seemed to respond. The torches flickered higher, and for a moment, the shadows stretched and twisted, forming strange, shifting shapes that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Kale's chest rose more fully, and his fingers flexed with a strength that was not his own yet. His face twitched, a muscle tightening as if a storm raged behind his closed eyelids. The healers stepped back, some crossing themselves, some biting their lips to remain silent. No one had seen such a sign of life in Kale for days. Serenia continued to whisper the word, soft but firm, her eyes never leaving his face. She could feel the pulse of magic within him, slow at first, then gaining strength with each repetition. It was like trying to light a fire buried beneath layers of ash and stone. Slowly, carefully, she coaxed it into a spark. Then it happened. Kyle's eyes snapped open. The sound of his breath, sharp and ragged, filled the hall. His gaze swept over the room like a storm breaking across a calm sea. The healers froze, the soldiers stiffened, and even the shadows seemed to shrink back. Kale's eyes were not the familiar deep brown of the living. They glimmered with a strange, otherworldly light, the color of twilight before a coming storm. He struggled to rise, his muscles stiff from days of stillness, yet he did so with a power that seemed larger than his own frame. Kale's presence filled the hall entirely, a tangible weight that drew both fear and awe. He scanned the faces around him, his gaze sharp, his mind trying to catch up with his body. Then it fell on Serenia. For a moment neither spoke. Cale's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and instinct. Who was this woman? How had she managed what no other healer could? And why did her presence calm something inside him that even the strongest battle could not? Serenia's voice broke the silence. "You are awake, Cale, not just your body, but your soul." Cale's eyes narrowed. There was a flicker of suspicion, of wariness, of alpha pride that refused to be questioned. "How?" he rasped. His voice was rough like gravel over stone, yet there was a hint of awe that he himself could not hide. Serenia did not answer immediately. Instead, she placed her hand lightly on his forearm. "I know the word that can call life back to what has been taken. I know the word that can reach into the part of you that the curse tried to destroy." Cale's chest rose and fell more steadily now, though the faint tremor of lingering magic ran through him. He felt both weak and stronger than ever, a contradiction that unsettled him. He wanted to pull away, to assert dominance as alpha and king, yet something restrained him. There was no fear, only curiosity, and perhaps something deeper, a faint stirring of trust. The other healers whispered among themselves, voices low and trembling. "She speaks the word of the old magics," one said. "It is not human to know such things." Serenia's eyes held Cale's, unblinking. "Rest is not enough," she said softly. "The curse that struck you is still there in shadows and echoes. I can guide you. If you will let me." Cale's jaw tightened. He did not like asking for help. He was the Alpha King. He should not need guidance. Yet something in her voice, something in her presence made him hesitate. The other healers looked at him, waiting, unsure if he would resist or accept. But Cale did something they had never seen before. He inclined his head slightly toward Serenia. The gesture was small, almost imperceptible, but it was an acknowledgement. A truce, a surrender of sorts. He would let her lead him through the shadows, even if only for a moment. Serenia smiled faintly, and the room seemed lighter, as if the weight of despair had been eased slightly. She knelt closer, lowering her hands to rest on his chest, her whisper now stronger, more commanding yet tender. The word repeated, echoing against stone and flame. Kyle felt the stirrings of life, of hope, coursing through him. The long days of silence and immobility seemed to recede, replaced by the strange energy that only she could awaken. His eyes met hers again, searching, questioning, and in that glance something unspoken passed between them. He was awake, but he was not whole. The curse still lingered, a shadow in the edges of his mind. The battle ahead was not just for his body, but for the very essence of who he was. And the woman who had awakened him, the healer with the ancient word, was now entwined with his fate in a way he did not yet understand. From the battlements above, a shadow shifted. Someone or something watched Winterthorn Keep with intent. Cale sensed it immediately, the pull of recognition deep in his chest. The war was far from over, and as he rose to stand fully, the first real spark of life since the curse fell into place, he knew instinctively the days ahead would test him in ways no battle ever could, and the woman at his side would be both his guide and his challenge. Serenia's whisper carried once more, soft as a breeze yet full of promise. Cale. And in that moment the Alpha King felt something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. Cliffhanger. But as his eyes scanned the horizon, Cale sensed a presence he could not ignore. Someone from his past had returned, silent, unseen, yet unmistakably near, and the peace of this awakening was about to shatter. The morning light crept slowly over Winterthorn Keep, turning the stone walls gold and amber. The chill of night still lingered in the corridors, and the air smelled faintly of smoke and herbs. Cale, the Alpha King, had been awake for hours, yet he felt as if he were walking through a dream. His body had regained strength, but the shadows of the curse still lingered in the corners of his mind. Every heartbeat was a reminder of what he had lost, and what he had yet to reclaim. Serenia was already moving through the hall when he emerged from his chambers. She carried no staff, no book, only the quiet power in her eyes and the confidence of one who had faced mysteries far older than mortal fears. Cale watched her, intrigued and cautious. He had seen warriors, kings, and beasts, but none like her. None who seemed to command authority with a whisper rather than a sword. "You are awake," she said, her voice calm yet firm. "Truly awake." Your body obeys you, but your soul still trembles in the shadow of the curse. Cale's hand brushed the edge of the table, steadying himself. And you were the one who... His voice faltered, as if the act of asking the question made the truth too heavy to bear. Serenia smiled faintly. I did not save your life. I only reached the part of you that wanted to survive. The curse tried to touch that part of your soul. I gave it a word to follow. That is all. Cale's eyes narrowed. A word? Yes. Serenia knelt before him, placing her hands lightly on the stone floor. Not just any word. One that reaches beyond the flesh, beyond the blood, to the place where your spirit lies. That place is fragile, broken, but it listens if you speak to it with care. Cale studied her for a long moment. He was used to commanding obedience, to being the alpha, the strongest among men. Yet here, standing in the quiet glow of the morning light, he felt a strange humility. He did not fully understand what she had done, yet he knew it was extraordinary. I don't feel like myself, he admitted, his voice low. The curse. It's still there, isn't it? Serenia nodded. The shadow lingers. But the word I gave you, it is a key. And you, your choices, your strength, your will decide whether the curse consumes you or fades into nothing. Cale's fingers clenched. And if it wins? Then the man who wakes in the morning is not the king, not the alpha, not the protector. Only a shadow remains. The warning sharpened Cale's instincts. He had faced death in battle many times, yet the threat of losing himself, of being twisted into something unrecognizable, terrified him more than any blade ever could. And yet, there was a pull toward Serenia, a strange and compelling need to trust her. The morning passed with careful guidance. Serenia spoke the word again and again, each repetition a thread weaving Cale's soul back together. She asked him to close his eyes, to listen to the rhythm of his own heartbeat, to feel the light of life beneath the darkness. Cale resisted at first, impatient and proud, but her calm insistence was a force he could not deny. As he followed her instructions, he began to feel the difference. The shadow that had clung to him like a second skin started to loosen. Thoughts he had thought buried, memories of betrayal, fear, and grief no longer felt like chains but like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be reassembled. For the first time since the curse fell, Cale felt a glimmer of control. Hours passed like this, and slowly he began to speak, not just responses but thoughts, questions, even fragments of dreams. He told her of battles fought and lost, of the weight of responsibility, and of the loneliness that came with being king. He spoke of fear, not of death, but of failing the people who had placed their lives in his hands. Serenia listened without judgment. When he faltered, when his voice shook, she guided him with the word, with her calm presence, and sometimes simply with silence. In those moments, Cale realized that trust could be a strength, not a weakness, and that surrendering to guidance did not mean surrendering control. By midday, the sun was high and the great hall had begun to fill with life. Soldiers moved about, their armor clanking softly, but Cale hardly noticed them. His attention was fixed on Serenia, on the subtle way she moved, the quiet authority in her voice, and the way her eyes seemed to pierce not just through him, but into him. You are changing, she said gently, as if reading his thoughts. The curse will fight. It will tempt you, twist your pride, challenge your instincts. You must be ready for it. Cale's jaw tightened. I will fight. Not because I must, but because I choose to. Serenia's lips curved slightly. Choice is more powerful than strength. The curse cannot bend what is chosen willingly. Their eyes met, and in that moment a silent understanding passed between them. The Alpha King and the healer were no longer merely king and servant, nor patient and guide. They were two forces meeting in the same storm, each learning the rhythm of the other. Yet peace in Winterthorn Keep was never meant to last. As the sun climbed higher, a shadow moved beyond the outer walls of the keep, silent and deliberate. Cale sensed it before anyone else. Something familiar yet impossible lingered at the edges of his awareness, a presence that made his chest tighten and his muscles coil with readiness. Serenia noticed the change in him. You feel it, she said softly, her hand brushing against his arm. Someone is near, Cale nodded. I know, I recognize it, but I cannot place it yet. His eyes narrowed, sharp and alert. The warmth of life that Serenia had restored could not dull his instincts. If danger approached, he would not be caught unready. The soldiers at the gates had already seen nothing. Yet Cale's intuition was correct. Someone or something had crossed the lands in secret, moving with purpose, watching Winterthorn Keep from a distance. Whoever it was, they carried knowledge of the curse and perhaps knowledge of him, knowledge that could tip the balance between life and death. Serenia followed his gaze. "You must focus, Kyle," she warned. "The shadow is not just a threat to your life, but to your soul. You cannot fight it with strength alone." Kyle's hands clenched into fists. "Then I will fight with all I have and with you beside me. If this shadow is part of the curse, then it will meet more than a king. It will meet an alpha awakened fully." Serenia's eyes softened. She did not need to speak the word. Kale's declaration, his determination, showed that the threads she had begun to weave into his soul were taking hold. The darkness could challenge him, but it could not dominate him. Not while he was willing to trust, willing to fight, willing to feel. The day passed in cautious vigilance. Kale practiced moving, testing his strength, his reflexes, and his senses. Each step reminded him of the power that still lingered in the shadows of the curse, but also of the life that Serenia had restored. Together, they explored the limits of his body and the boundaries of his mind, forging a connection that went beyond healer and king, beyond instruction and obedience. By evening, the sky was awash of gold and violet, and the torches were lit once more. Kale stood atop the balcony overlooking the keep, the kingdom stretching out beneath him. Serenia stood beside him, her presence steady and reassuring. For a moment the world seemed to pause, holding its breath. Then Kale's eyes, sharp and alert, caught the movement of a figure slipping through the distant trees. A chill ran down his spine. The figure was cloaked, silent, and purposeful. Kale's instincts flared. He knew this figure. The shadow of someone who had once been part of his life, now returned with unknown intent. Serenia placed her hand lightly on his arm. "Whatever comes," she said quietly, "we face it together. The word you carry is your anchor, but the strength you choose to wield will decide the outcome." Kale nodded. His heart beat fast, his mind sharp. He was awake now, not just in body but in spirit. And yet, the shadow beyond the trees promised that the awakening was only the beginning of a far greater challenge. The wind carried a whisper through the leaves, soft and sinister. Kale tightened his fists, feeling the stirrings of the curse and the presence of an old enemy entwined. The battle ahead would not just test his strength or skill, it would test his heart, his mind, and the fragile trust he was beginning to place in Serenia. Cliffhanger. As the figure drew closer, Kale's chest tightened. Recognition burned in his veins. The enemy he had thought lost, the one who had left a curse upon him, had returned. And now the true test of his awakening and his bond with Serenia was about to begin. Night had fallen over Winterthorn Keep, and the moon hung like a pale sentinel in the sky, casting silver light over the towers and battlements. Inside the great hall, Kale sat by the fire, his gaze distant. Though he was awake and his body strong again, the remnants of the curse lingered in his mind like a shadow waiting to strike. Every movement, every thought reminded him of the fragility of life, and of the trust he had begun to place in the healer who had awakened him. Serenia moved quietly across the hall, carrying a small satchel filled with herbs and charms. She did not speak immediately. Instead, she observed Kale, studying the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted toward every flicker of shadow. She knew the curse was not gone. It lingered like a thorn beneath the skin, a constant threat that could twist even the strongest man into darkness. "Kyle," she said softly, breaking the silence, "you cannot fight it with strength alone. You must face it with understanding." Kale's eyes flicked to her. "Understanding?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. "I am a king. I am an alpha. Strength is my weapon. You think words and herbs can undo what magic and malice have done to me?" Serenia knelt before him, placing the satchel carefully on the floor. "Words, yes. Strength, yes. But both alone are not enough. The curse is not merely of the body, it is of the soul. It feeds on fear, pride, and unspoken regrets. You must face them or it will consume you." Kale's jaw tightened. He had faced armies, beasts, and betrayal, yet the idea that his own mind could be the battlefield unnerved him. "And you? You claim you can guide me through it?" She nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I can, but only if you allow me." There was a long pause. Kale's pride and instinct told him to reject her guidance, to stand alone, to fight the curse with raw power. Yet something inside him, something deeper than instinct, older than fear, urged him to listen. To trust. Slowly he inclined his head. Very well, he said. Show me. Serenia smiled faintly. She placed her hand on his chest, over the heart that had been still for so long, and whispered the word that had called him back to life. The sound was soft like wind through the trees, yet it carried a weight that seemed to vibrate through the room. Cale closed his eyes, focusing on the word, letting it anchor him. The fire flickered, casting strange shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Cale felt the stirrings of the curse deep within his mind, dark whispers of anger, betrayal, and fear. He wanted to fight, to lash out, to reject it entirely. But Serenia's voice guided him, steady and patient. Do not resist it, she whispered. Face it, name it. Let it speak, and then choose your own words to answer it. Kyle opened his eyes and saw visions of the battle that had left him cursed. The sorcerer who had struck him, the chaos and blood, the cries of his soldiers. It all replayed in vivid, painful detail. His chest tightened, his fists clenched, but he did not move to strike. Instead, he focused on the word Serenia had given him, repeating it quietly under his breath. Slowly, the visions began to lose their power. The anger softened, the fear waned, and the sorrow that had seemed unbearable became something he could face. For the first time in days, Cale felt not only alive but in control of himself. Serenia watched him carefully. You are stronger than the curse, she said. But it is not gone. It will test you again. Kyle nodded, understanding the truth of her words. He had faced many battles, yet this one, this battle within himself, was unlike any other. And he knew he could not win alone. As the night deepened, Cale began to speak, not of the battle but of his life before the curse. He spoke of his childhood, of the expectations placed upon him as heir to the throne, of the loneliness that had followed him even among allies and friends. He spoke of choices he had made, victories he had won, and lives he had failed to save. Each confession was like a release, a thread pulled from the tangle of shadow within him. Serenia listened, never interrupting, never judging. When he faltered, when the weight of his own memories threatened to crush him, she placed her hand over his and whispered the word once more. Cale felt a warmth spread through him, a reminder that he was not alone, that he was still whole in ways the curse could not touch. Hours passed, and the bond between them grew. It was not spoken aloud, but Cale felt it. A connection deeper than loyalty, stronger than fear, more compelling than instinct. He trusted her, perhaps more than he had ever trusted anyone, and yet he could not name the feelings that stirred within him. The quiet of the night was broken by a sound from outside the hall. Cale's senses sharpened immediately. A shadow moved among the trees beyond the keep's walls, deliberate and silent. He recognized it instantly, the presence of someone who had once been part of his life, now returned with unknown purpose. Kyle, Serenia said softly, following his gaze. You feel it, don't you? He nodded. Yes, someone is watching. Someone I know? His voice was tense, edged with a mixture of anticipation and caution. The curse had made him wary of strangers, but this presence was familiar. Too familiar. Serenia placed her hand lightly on his arm. You cannot face this alone. But you do not have to. Let me stand with you. Cale inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future. He had awakened from the curse, but the world had not grown safer. Shadows still lurked. Old enemies still moved in silence. And the bond between him and Serenia was about to be tested in ways neither of them could yet imagine. He rose from the fire, his movements fluid and controlled, though the shadow within him still whispered. Then we face it, he said, voice steady. Together. Serenia nodded, her eyes reflecting both determination and something softer, an understanding of the man he was and the man he was becoming. Together, she agreed. They moved to the balcony where the moonlight painted the stone in silver. The figure in the trees became clearer, a cloaked silhouette moving with intent, approaching the keep with silent steps. Cale's senses sharpened, the instinct to protect rising within him. I know him, Cale murmured, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. The one who cursed me? He has returned. Serenia's hand tightened slightly on his arm. Then we must be ready. The curse is not the only danger. This one knows your weaknesses, your fears, and perhaps even the word that saved you. You must be careful, Kyle. You cannot rely on strength alone. Cale's eyes narrowed, a fire igniting in their depths. Then we will meet him with more than strength. We will meet him with life and with the bond he cannot break. Serenya's lips curved faintly. Yes, and remember, the word is your anchor. Let it guide you, but do not let it chain you. You are stronger than the curse, stronger than fear, and together, we are stronger than any shadow that comes for us. The wind carried a whisper through the trees, soft and sinister. Kale's chest tightened, muscles coiling with instinctive readiness. The shadow figure paused at the edge of the forest, and for a brief moment the two men, one cursed and awake, one returning with dark intent, stood on opposite sides of a silent battlefield. Kale looked at Serenya. "Whatever comes," he said, voice low and steady, "we face it together. The curse cannot win while I am awake, and while I choose life over shadow." Serenya's hand brushed against his, warm and steady, a quiet reminder of trust and strength. "Then let it begin," she whispered. The figure in the forest took another step forward, and Kale's pulse quickened. He could feel the tension in the air, the weight of what was to come. The battle ahead was no longer just within him. It was real, external, and dangerous. And now, with Serenya by his side, he knew that the fight would test not only his strength, but his heart, his soul, and the fragile trust that had begun to bloom between them. Cliffhanger. As the shadow crossed the edge of the forest and stepped into the moonlight, Kale felt a shock of recognition. The enemy he thought lost, the one who had left the curse upon him, was here. And this time the stakes were higher than ever, not just for him, but for the woman who had awakened him, and for the kingdom he had sworn to protect. The wind howled through the towers of Winterthorn Keep, carrying the scent of distant forests and the faint metallic tang of fear. Kale stood atop the battlements, his gaze fixed on the approaching shadow from the forest. Moonlight silvered his armor, and every muscle in his body tensed like a coiled spring. The figure moved deliberately, silent yet unmistakably aware of the Alpha King's presence. Serenya came up beside him, her cloak fluttering in the wind. She did not speak immediately, sensing that Kale needed this moment to center himself. He had faced enemies before, yet this was different. The shadow that approached carried knowledge, malice, and the memory of the curse that had almost claimed his life. But now he was awake, alive in ways he had not been for weeks, and he was not alone. "You are ready," Serenya said softly, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. "Remember, strength alone will not win this. You must trust yourself, and me." Kale's eyes met hers. In the silver light, he saw more than guidance. He saw a calm power, quiet yet unshakable. He had faced warriors, beasts, and generals, but never someone who could command his attention without raising a weapon. He nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth in her words. The shadow reached the outer walls of the keep and stepped fully into the moonlight. Kale's breath caught. Recognition surged through him. The figure was a man he had once called an ally, a warrior who had turned to envy and betrayal, the one who had orchestrated the curse that had stolen his life. His face was partially hidden beneath a hood, but the cold gleam in his eyes was unmistakable. "Kyle," the man said, voice low and steady, carrying both threat and familiarity. "I thought you were lost to us forever. Yet here you stand, alive. The curse, it should have taken you." Kyle's jaw tightened. "It almost did," he replied. "But not today. Not while I stand, and not while she stands with me." His gaze flicked to Serenya. She did not flinch. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly, her eyes unwavering, a quiet challenge that mirrored his own. The air between them grew taut, charged with more than anticipation. Kyle felt the pulse of life within him, steady and strong, strengthened by the bond forming with Serenya. He had once ruled through fear, through strength alone. Now he realized there was another way, a way to command respect and power through trust, through unity, through shared purpose. "You have grown strong, Kale," the man said, stepping closer, "but strength alone cannot save you from the shadows within. You still carry the curse in your blood. It whispers to you, tempts you, waits for the moment you falter." Kale's eyes narrowed. "I will not falter." He drew his sword from its sheath, the metal catching the moonlight. He was ready to fight, yet he knew that this battle was more than a duel of steel. It was a test of will, of mind, and of soul. Serenya moved closer, placing a steadying hand on his arm. "Remember the word," she whispered. "It is your anchor. Let it guide you, not bind you." Kyle closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. He whispered the word Serenya had given him, feeling its power anchor him, steadying the storm within. The shadows in his mind recoiled slightly, like mist before sunlight. He opened his eyes, now clear and unwavering. The enemy lunged, striking with speed and precision honed over years of training. Cale met him with equal skill, their swords clashing in sparks of steel. Yet the duel was more than physical. Cale felt the curse tugging at him, urging him to anger, to strike recklessly, to lose control. But he breathed, whispered the word in his mind, and regained focus. Each strike, each parry, was guided not by raw force alone, but by clarity and restraint. Serenia watched from the battlements, her hands ready with herbs and charms, but she did not intervene. Cale needed to face this, to prove to himself that he could wield strength and will together, that he could remain king and human simultaneously. The duel raged across the battlements, swords clashing with echoes that carried into the silent night. Cale's opponent was relentless, skilled, and driven by malice, but Cale was anchored by something stronger. His connection to Serenia, the word that had awakened him, and the choice to face the curse rather than succumb to it, gave him a clarity his enemy could not match. Finally, with a swift maneuver, Cale disarmed the man, pressing the tip of his sword to the other's chest. His eyes blazed not with rage but with certainty. "Yield," he commanded. "Your shadow cannot hold power over me anymore." The enemy's hood fell back, revealing a face twisted with frustration and fear. For the first time, he realized that the curse he had placed was not enough. Cale had awakened fully, not just in body, but in spirit, and his bond with Serenia made him stronger than any magic or treachery. The man fell to his knees, defeated but alive. Cale did not strike again. He sheathed his sword and stepped back, his chest rising and falling steadily. Strength was not the only measure of power, he realized. Compassion, restraint, and the willingness to trust had won tonight. Serenia moved to his side, placing her hand lightly on his shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. "You faced both the enemy and the shadow within. You are stronger than you know." Cale met her gaze, and for a long moment they stood in silence. The wind swept through the battlements, carrying the scent of the forest and the faint promise of dawn. He felt a strange warmth, not of fire, but of presence, of connection, trust, and something that stirred deeper than pride or victory. "You saved me," he said quietly, voice low and measured, not from him, but from myself, from the curse, from the shadow. Serenia shook her head gently. "I only guided you. The strength was always yours. The courage, the choice. You made them. I only whispered a word, but you lived it, Kyle. That is your power." For the first time in days, Kyle allowed himself to relax, to breathe fully without tension. The night had tested him, and he had passed, not as a king alone, not as an alpha, but as a man who had reclaimed himself, who had faced darkness with clarity, and who had learned the value of trust. Yet even as he felt relief, a faint unease lingered. The enemy had retreated, but he had not vanished. The curse had not fully lifted, and the bond between Cale and Serenia, while powerful and life-saving, brought its own complications. Strength and desire, power and vulnerability, they danced together in ways neither of them fully understood. Cale turned to Serenia. "The battle is over for now, but I know it is not the last. Shadows will come, and the curse may return in ways we do not expect." Serenia's eyes reflected both understanding and determination. "Then we prepare together, and Cale, do not fear the bond we share. It is not weakness. It is another form of strength." Cale's lips curved faintly, a smile rare and genuine. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps strength alone is never enough. Perhaps some things must be chosen, felt, and trusted." They stood together on the battlements as dawn began to spread its pale light across the kingdom. Birds called softly in the trees below, the wind shifted, and the night receded. For a moment the world seemed at peace. Cale and Serenia, standing side by side, felt the weight of what had been endured and the fragile hope of what was yet to come. But peace is never permanent in Winterthorn Keep. From the forest beyond, a shadow stirred. The enemy had retreated, but he had not given up. He had witnessed Cale's awakening, had felt the strength of the bond between king and healer, and would not forget it. Cale sensed it first, the faint pull of recognition and challenge in the air. He looked to Serenia. "He will return," he said, voice low but steady. "And next time he may not come alone. Serenia placed her hand on his arm, firm and reassuring. Then we meet him together. The word, the bond, and your strength. We are ready. Kyle's eyes, sharp and clear, swept across the horizon. The kingdom lay before him, fragile and vulnerable, yet he was no longer afraid. He had faced the curse, reclaimed himself, and discovered a power beyond strength. The shadows could come, the enemy could return, and the night could challenge him, but Kale knew one thing for certain. He would not face it alone. And as the sun rose over Winterthorn Keep, bathing the towers in gold and silver, Kale felt a new certainty take root. Life, strength, and trust were not separate. They were intertwined. And the woman who had whispered one word to awaken him held a place in his heart that no shadow could touch. Cliffhanger. From the edge of the forest, hidden eyes watched the battlements. The enemy Kyle had faced tonight was not acting alone. Reinforcements, skilled and silent, were moving through the darkness. The true test of Kale's awakening and the bond he shared with Serenia was yet to come. The first light of dawn broke over Winterthorn Keep, spilling pale gold across the towers and battlements. The wind carried a faint chill, but Kale felt a warmth in his chest, a steady pulse of life, strength, and purpose. He had faced the curse, confronted the enemy, and survived the shadow that threatened to claim him. Yet he knew the battle was not over. The true challenge awaited him beyond the walls, in the forest that had become the breeding ground of his enemies. Serenia stood beside him, her cloak catching the breeze, her eyes sharp and unwavering. The bond between them was no longer a quiet trust. It was a lifeline, a force that intertwined their strengths. Kale had learned that power was more than brute force. It was understanding, connection, and the willingness to face fear alongside another. "The enemy knows your strength now," she said softly, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "He will not come alone. Are you ready?" Kale's eyes scanned the horizon, every shadow, every movement in the trees. "I am ready," he said, voice firm. "And this time, we do not face him as one against many. We face him together, and we decide the outcome before he can strike." The forest shifted, subtle movements betraying the approach of foes. Kale drew his sword, its steel gleaming in the morning light. Soldiers from the keep began to take their positions, their armor clinking softly. But Kale's focus remained on the shadows moving among the trees. Each figure was trained, silent, and dangerous, yet Kyle felt no fear. He had faced death, betrayal, and the curse itself, and he had survived. Serenia stepped forward, her hands holding charms and herbs, her presence calm yet commanding. She whispered the word once more, and Kale felt its power flow through him, steadying his heartbeat and sharpening his senses. The curse's remnants recoiled slightly, unable to touch the strength now rooted in his spirit. From the edge of the forest, the enemy emerged. The man who had once cursed Kyle walked forward, flanked by warriors cloaked in shadows, their eyes cold and unwavering. The tension was palpable, as though the forest itself held its breath. Kale stepped forward onto the open ground, sword in hand. "I do not seek revenge," he called, his voice carrying across the clearing. "I seek justice. The curse is broken, and the bond that guides me cannot be undone. Leave or face the consequence of your actions." The enemy laughed, a low, bitter sound. "Justice?" he spat. "You are a king of shadows now, tethered by a healer's whisper. You are not the same man who once walked these lands. I will finish what I began." Kale's gaze did not waver. "Then come," he said simply. "But know this, I am not the man you cursed. I am awake. I am whole, and I will protect what is mine." The warriors surged forward, silent and precise, attacking in unison. Kale met them with skill honed over years, each strike deliberate, each movement calculated. But this was more than a battle of steel. The curse whispered in his mind, attempting to twist his thoughts, to feed his anger, to make him falter. He inhaled deeply, grounding himself in the word Serenia had given him, letting it anchor his spirit. Serenia moved among the soldiers, her presence a shield and a guide. She tossed herbs and charms that flared with light, disrupting the enemy's coordination. Kale realized that her strength was not just in magic, it was in clarity and understanding, in the calm authority that allowed him to fight without being consumed by fear. The enemy leader approached Kale directly, sword drawn, eyes filled with malice. "This ends now, Alpha King," he said. Kale tightened his grip on his sword. "It ends when justice is done," he replied. "And that justice will be mine to deliver." They clashed, swords ringing against each other in a flurry of sparks. Cale felt the familiar pull of the curse's remnants, whispering doubts, urging him to strike recklessly. But he held himself steady, letting the word and the bond with Serenia guide him. Each strike was not just defense, but a statement of control, clarity, and purpose. The duel raged, but Cale's awareness of his surroundings and his connection to Serenia gave him the advantage. He parried a strike, then feinted, forcing the enemy to overextend. With a swift, precise motion, Cale disarmed him, the sword clattering to the ground. The remaining warriors faltered at the sight, unsure without their leader's command. Cale's eyes blazed, filled not with anger, but with authority. "Your power ends here," he declared. "Leave or face the consequences of your choices." The enemy leader fell to his knees, sweat and blood marking his face. He realized then that the curse had failed, that Cale had reclaimed himself fully, and that the bond with Serenia had made him stronger than any magic or shadow could break. Cale did not strike again. Instead, he stepped back, breathing steadily. The remaining warriors fled into the forest, their resolve shattered. The curse's whispers had been silenced, its power broken by trust, choice, and courage. Cale felt the final remnants of darkness recede, leaving him whole in body, mind, and spirit. Serenia moved to his side, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. "You faced the curse, the enemy, and yourself. You are truly awake now." Cale turned to her, his eyes reflecting gratitude, respect, and something deeper. A quiet bond that had grown stronger than any battle could break. "I could not have done it without you," he admitted. "You gave me more than life. You gave me clarity, purpose, and trust." Serenia smiled, faint but warm. "And you reclaimed what was always yours. The choice, the strength, it was always within you. I only guided you." For a long moment they stood together in the morning light, the weight of the past lifting from their shoulders. The kingdom below them was safe, the enemy defeated, and the curse finally broken. Cale realized that true strength was not just in power or skill, but in the willingness to face fear, accept guidance, and trust in bonds beyond oneself. "Cale," Serenia said softly, breaking the silence, "there is something else you must understand. Power, courage, and life are not the only things that awaken a person. So too can the heart." Cale's gaze softened. He understood now what she meant. The bond between them was more than convenience or circumstance. It was a connection forged in trial, struggle, and shared purpose, a bond that had grown into something neither of them could deny. He reached for her hand, holding it firmly yet gently. "Then we face the future together," he said. "Whatever comes, we will face it side by side, not as king and healer, but as two people who have seen the shadows and chosen life and trust instead." Serenia's eyes shimmered, reflecting the sunlight and a quiet joy. "Yes," she said. "Together." The sun climbed higher, illuminating Winterthorn Keep in gold and silver. Birds sang in the trees, and the wind carried a sense of renewal. Cale and Serenia stood on the battlements side by side, their presence a symbol of unity, trust, and the awakening of more than just a king. For Cale, the world had changed. He was no longer the man who had been cursed, the alpha haunted by shadows. He was whole, awakened body, mind, and spirit. He had faced the curse, confronted the enemy, and discovered a bond that gave him a strength beyond any weapon. And as he looked out over his kingdom, Cale knew one final truth: life, courage, and trust were not separate. They were intertwined, and the awakening of the Alpha King was complete. Epilogue. In the days that followed, Winterthorn Keep flourished. The enemy had been defeated, the curse fully broken, and the kingdom safe once more. Cale ruled with strength tempered by understanding, guided by trust and the bond he shared with Serenia. Together they faced challenges, celebrated victories, and forged a future built on choice, courage, and connection. And in the quiet moments, when the world seemed still, Cale remembered the one word that had awakened him, and the woman who had helped him reclaim everything he had lost.